In our previous investigation, we discovered that the horrors of Bloodborne were mostly based on the violent transformation from manhood to beasthood. But as we witnessed the tragic demise of its residents, we realized that these entities were mostly caused by a system that was corrupt. These systems promoted the careless use of the old blood, which at the end caused these horrifying transformations. Yet as we established at the end of our last study, the beasts were merely a distraction. When the hunter slew Rom, her illusion was shattered and we witnessed the sky turning into a deep red color. The blood moon has now descended, and the true nature of Yharnam is finally revealed. With the veil permanently lifted, the hunt fundamentally changes. We will be dealing with the cosmic creatures that molded and shaped every event in Yharnam. In this second chapter, we will analyze the horrors that emerge only after the descent of the blood moon. We will examine their twisted anatomies, their sound design, the environment they reside in, and read the item descriptions associated with them to piece together their tragedies. The descent into the unseen village usually happens against your will. In the lower streets of the cathedral ward, towering figures carrying heavy blood-stained sacks roam the alleys. If one of these snatchers defeats you in combat, you are kidnapped and you wake up locked inside a heavy iron cage in the Hypogean jail. The design and architecture of this place serves a single function, which is mass confinement. The walls are built from thick, cold stone. A deep, unsettling choral chant echoes continuously through the corridors. The enemies patrolling the halls hit with extreme force to ensure prisoners never escape. But beyond these enemies and the place itself, there is a more horrifying encounter. In Hypogean jail, from the lantern entering the first prison room, there is a hole that leads outside. Dropping down from the ledge, you will step out into a wide ruined courtyard. As you approach the center of the arena, the remains violently shift. The bones snap together and rise high into the air to form darkbeast Parl. The physical appearance of Parl is extremely different from any other creatures we have encountered so far. Most of the beasts in Yharnam have this werewolf-like appearance with extended snouts and jagged teeth, but this creature is different as it has no such anatomical features. The creature has entirely lost its flesh. Not even a single strand of muscle or organs stretch the body of this creature. The skeleton and the frame of this creature is entirely surrounded by a massive current of blue electricity. Sparks arc violently across the ribcage and down the spindly limbs. The entire posture of the dark beast is hunched. It holds the stance of a predator crouching low as if preparing to sprint or pounce directly at the player. The anatomy of this creature appears severely extended and stretched. The spine of the neck are unnaturally long, matching the extreme length of the legs and arms. The pelvic bone and the ribs are heavily exposed, highlighting the complete absence of muscle mass. A thick mane of wiry hair covers the spine and ribcage. Examining the skull reveals a deeply unsettling detail. The face looks surprisingly human. It features a wrinkle-covered bone structure, but the jaw is massive and elongated, suited for feeding on prey. If you manage to strip away the elemental fur surrounding its head, you can see a dark, wet, slimy protrusion resting inside the skull. It appears to retain a brain. It is kind of shocking that the creature has no signs of muscle and organs, yet it retains the singular organ which it uses to control the beast. During combat, Parl moves with erratic speed. It leaps vast distances and performs rapid sweeping claw strikes. The electricity surging around its frame acts as both an offensive weapon and a protective barrier. When Parl gathers energy to unleash an area of effect blast, the blue sparks cover the entire courtyard, forcing you to retreat or perfectly time a dodge roll under its jaw. The camera mechanism during this encounter becomes a huge problem. The massive body, the low hunched posture, and the limbs take up the entire screen, making it difficult to track the sweeping attacks or even see the direction of your own weapon swings. The most effective strategy requires staying underneath the frame and aggressively targeting the weak legs. These mechanics highlight the sheer fragility of the monster. If you focus your weapon strikes on the thin bony limbs, the skeleton eventually breaks down and Parl falls to the ground. The massive electrical charge completely dissipates. For a brief window, Parl loses its glow and collapses onto the dirt. It struggles to stand, appearing as nothing more than a frail collection of broken bones trying to assemble itself back together. To recover its strength, the beast must retreat, stand on its hind legs, and howl to summon the electric field back into its bones. The origins of this creature connect directly to Archibald, an eccentric inventor from the Healing Church workshop. The item descriptions from the Tornitrus and Bolt paper state that Archibald was deeply fascinated by the blue sparks emitted by the dark beast. He dedicated his life's work to artificially reproducing that specific electrical current. Defeating this boss rewards the player with the Spark Hunter badge, which proves a direct link to Archibald's inner circle. The name Parl translates to pearl in Dutch and Afrikaans. This provides some interesting insights. We know that Archibald was fascinated by the dark beast, so this might suggest that the beast was the absolute crown jewel of Archibald's research. This beast was so important to his research that he might have ended up naming it Parl, or the Pearl. The location of this fight provides further context regarding its imprisonment. The Hypogean jail is controlled by the School of Mensis, an institution known for human experimentation. The tunnel leading to the graveyard was likely created forcefully by the beast itself trying to escape its cell. Since the heavy doors to Old Yharnam were locked tight, the creature was trapped in the courtyard. Arl was likely a dark beast dragged up from ancient dungeons as experimental fodder, or a former spark hunter who succumbed to the affliction and mutated early inside the prison walls. While exploring these prison blocks, you find a specific summon sign for a hunter named Defector Antle. He wears the Yahargul set, proving that he was once a heavily involved member of the School of Mensis. Antle likely witnessed the horrific extremes of the Mensis experiments and turned against his own ranks. He stands ready to help you slay Parl, attempting to put the tortured beast out of its misery and correct the sins of his former colleagues. The blue lightning indicates a direct connection to Lauren, an ancient Thumerian land buried in the sand. In the Chalice dungeons, the air of Lauren is inherently electrified, filled with creatures like silver beasts and the abhorrent beast. Comparing Dark Beast Peril to the abhorrent beast reveals distinct evolutionary differences in the scourge. The abhorrent beast walks upright on two legs and possesses a heavily muscled top-heavy dense physique. Dark Beast Parl is strictly quadrupedal and entirely skeletal. The abhorrent beast generates sparks through kinetic movement, wind currents, and sheer physical rage. Parl controls the electricity natively, using it as an elemental foundation to animate its dead frame. Because of its skeletal nature, Parl is slower and less aggressive than the abhorrent beast, relying on wide elemental strikes rather than primal close-quarter hits. To fully grasp the wide gap between Dark Beast Parl and the abhorrent beast, we must examine how the Lauren strain affects different hosts. Both entities wield the blue lightning of the old tombs. Their physical development, however, sits at opposite extremes. Parl seems to be in a state of decaying. The elemental spark acts as a raw substitute for a beating heart, forcing a dead skeleton to walk. It lacks the internal organs required to sustain higher reasoning. The creature operates strictly on basic aggressive instincts, lashing out at anything that enters its domain. The electrical field serves as the only force keeping the bones connected. Because of its frail skeletal nature, Parl is slower and relies heavily on wide area of effect strikes, whereas the abhorrent beasts are very different. They are, as mentioned before, top-heavy, have shorter limbs, extremely fast, aggressive, and rely more on physical prowess rather than the lightning attacks mostly used by darkbeast Parl. The most disturbing difference lies in the retention of the human mind. Parl can only emit a high-pitched shriek, as the flesh around its throat dissolved long ago, whereas an abhorrent beast which is secretly disguised as the suspicious beggar speaks with perfect diction. He retains complete control over his vocal cords even after transforming into a towering mass of fur and muscle. Usually, beasts elongate their anatomies upon transformation, which causes their vocal cords to malfunction, but such is not the case with this specific abhorrent beast.
Have you got a screw loose? Or is it your animal intuition?
The beggar entirely mastered the affliction instead of submitting to it. This has never been seen in any type of beast before. We know from Vicar Amelia or even Gascoigne that some level of humanity is retained in these moments when the beasthood within them transforms. But the suspicious beggar is clever, as he seems to be unaffected by this transformation and can fully use his speech as a disguise. By maintaining a polite demeanor and a helpless attitude, he lures unsuspecting victims into isolation. He uses language to question the morality of the player and to justify his own survival. He understands exactly what he is doing. He consumes flesh to feed his massive frame, and he uses his intellect to ensure a steady supply of food. It simply weaponized his intelligence, making him a far superior hunter. The audio design of the encounter provides a critical piece of evidence regarding the past life of the creature. When Parl raises its head to summon the electrical field, it releases a high-pitched piercing shriek. The auditory frequency is nearly identical to the screams produced by the cleric beast. As observed in central Yharnam, high-ranking members of the healing church suffered the most severe and agonizing transformations. Their screams indicated physical agony from a frame stretched to its absolute limit. By sharing this exact vocalization, the game heavily implies that Parl was originally a high-ranking cleric, or possibly a member of the Spark Hunter who got transformed. If you leave the creature alive and return after the blood moon descends, the entire atmosphere of the jail shifts. The original lantern is shattered. The snatchers lie dead on the stone floors. Instead, the chapel above the courtyard is occupied by a coordinated trio of Yahar'gul hunters. These operatives wield highly specialized equipment including the rifle spear, the cannon, and the beast claw. One specific hunter uses the tiny Tonitrus, directly utilizing the elemental power Archibald studied. They stand shoulder to shoulder, creating a lethal blockade. They operate under the school of Mensis to protect the ongoing rituals. Their presence directly above the graveyard suggests they are actively guarding the perimeter, ensuring outsiders do not interfere and that experimental subjects like Parl remain firmly locked in the lower levels. The existence of Parl connects to another figure from the old days of the hunt, Irreverent Izzy. Izzy was a hunter during the early days of the Healing Church. While normal hunters used forged metal swords and firearms, Izzy closely studied the monsters. He was completely obsessed with the darkbeast. He wanted to harvest their biology and use their power. Izzy created two specific items from the remains of these skeletal creatures. The first is the Beast Roar. This hunter tool utilizes the actual vocal cords ripped from an undead dark beast. When you activate it, you force your own breath through the dead vocal cords to create a concussive shockwave that deflects projectiles and knocks enemies down. The second item is the Beast Claw. Izzy crafted this weapon directly from dark beast bones. When you equip the Beast Claw, The dead bones physically bind to your hands. It forces you to fight with wild, tearing motions. Striking enemies with these claws actively builds up your beasthood meter, making you deal more damage while taking more damage in return. Izzy earned the title Irreverent because he completely ignored the rules of the church. He respected the physical power of the beasts far more than he respected human weapons. He taught his admirers to embrace the bloodlust rather than fight it. There is another anomaly regarding these beasts. Standard beasts in Yharnam are highly susceptible to fire and serrated weapons. Harl shares the fire weakness, but takes significantly more damage from arcane attacks. The creature is held together by an unnatural force. Striking it with arcane energy disrupts the creature, proving that the dark beasts are mostly held by elemental magic. For those who delve deep into the ancient Chalice dungeons, a much older and far more lethal variant waits at the bottom of the lower Lauren labyrinth. The Lauren darkbeast represents the absolute extreme of this affliction. It possesses a drastically larger health pool and relentless aggression, proving that the curse of the darkbeast only grows stronger as it ages. Upon reaching Advent Plaza at the lowest point of the unseen village, you are immediately flanked by elevated stone walkways. Standing on these balconies are chime maidens, actively ringing their bells to conduct a massive summoning ritual. Above the plaza, the red sky tears open. Before the entity even appears, a thick, repulsive slime pours from the opening. A single, fully formed human corpse drops then, completely drenched in a wet, gooey liquid. Seconds later, an incomprehensible mass of bodies follows, crashing heavily into the cobblestones. The one reborn arrives. The sheer scale of the creature is extremely revolting. It looks entirely like a massive pile of wet, rotting meat. There is no structural logic to its frame, and absolutely no distinction of internal organs. Whatever the creature is, looking at it, the best description that can be given would be a pile of wet, rotting corpses formed into a sludge. The base of the creature consists of hundreds of corpses fused into human tentacles. Examining the side reveals legs and arms of varying sizes protruding randomly, proving that this mass is a collection of entirely different people swept up from the streets and the alleys. A thick red fluid pools around its lower half, flowing continuously and acting as the primary energy source to keep the dead limbs moving. It drags its weight forward using the largest, most developed legs as pillars. Rising from the center of this rotting pile is a singular, massive humanoid figure. This, along with the limbs, are the only distinguishable parts of this creature. From what it seems like, this corpse acts as the primary operator that controls this creature. The skin on the central figure is completely erased and gone. The exposed ribcage and bones are clearly visible. Though raw strips of red meat still cling to the joints, its face remains undeniably that of a human. But the jaw is locked, which makes the mouth wide open, making the creature look like it's in shock. The animations of this central figure tell a deeply disturbing story. During the encounter, the humanoid will suddenly grab its own head with both hands, thrashing wildly. The movement heavily mimics a person suffering from severe regret, reacting as if it suddenly realizes what it has become. In other moments, the figure raises its arms towards the sky, shivering violently in a desperate attempt to pray to the great ones above. The entity appears completely aware of its wretched state. The sound design accompanying these movements breaks away from the standard audio cues found in Yharnam. Most enemies rely on varying pitches of screams to convey aggression. The one reborn produces a bizarre array of noises. Even when it is simply shifting its weight, the mass generates wet, slimy, squelching sounds that echo loudly across the plaza. When the central figure vocalizes, it recites a continuous rhythmic chant. The voice sounds very damaged, indicating the vocal cords are shredded and the lungs are entirely collapsed. The entity constantly gasps for air between its prayers. During aggressive maneuvers, the audio becomes even stranger. It incorporates distorted growls resembling a large feline, closely mirroring the frantic shrieks found in the Irreverent dungeon. The entity then produces a sequence of erratic grunts, burping noises, and sneezing sounds too. Engaging the creatures requires killing the Chime Maidens on the balconies, who constantly cast fireballs and shoot purple projectiles to heal the boss. The most effective approach involves running past the mass, climbing the enclosed spiral staircase, and executing the women first. Removing the casters isolates the entity on the ground floor. The attacks of the one reborn are chaotic and cover massive areas. It utilizes a maneuver known as flailing corpses, where every fused limb on its body furiously kicks and swipes in all directions. The central humanoid can cast a vein shot, charging a massive ball of energy above its head to use as a precision projectile. A highly lethal spell is the Rain of Flesh. The central figure summons a tracking shower of severed body parts that drop directly onto the player. If the hunter remains too close to its base, the creature will halt entirely and discharge a massive flood of putrid acidic vomit onto the arena floor, forcing an immediate retreat. The existence of this construct reveals the ultimate goal of the School of Mensis. The scholars initiated an unholy Thumerian ritual using the kidnapped populace of the city. They attempted to artificially ascend humanity by fusing thousands of citizens into a single supreme being. The ritual completely failed, which means that the entire population died for nothing. The layout of Advent Plaza serves as a deliberate homage to probably the Tower Knight fight from Demon Souls. The structure features a large courtyard flanked by two elevated walkways lined with pillars. Ranged attackers position themselves on the high ground to constantly harass the player. The strategic solution for this encounter remains exactly the same as seen in the Tower Knight fight. You bypass the giant, climb the stairs, and clear the balconies. Once the Chime Maidens fall, you return to the ground floor and focus all aggression on the legs of the construct. Focusing your strikes on the larger limbs acting as pillars yields a good result while fighting the boss. Landing a sustained sequence of heavy attacks causes the targeted leg to violently burst, erupting with a massive spray of blood. Breaking these limbs shatters the posture of the creature. The entire pile of flesh collapses onto the cobblestones. When the mass falls, the central humanoid operator slumps forward, completely helpless. The player can then step directly up to the face and execute a massive visual strike into the open jaw. We must also examine the literal meaning behind its title and its entrance. The portal opening in the red sky visually replicates a cosmic birth. The entity drops through the tear completely drenched in an amniotic slime. The name, the One Reborn, suggests the scholars were attempting to reincarnate a specific ancient god rather than creating an entirely new one. The scholars rushed the process. They lacked the necessary cosmic elements, so they substituted the procedure with raw humans, compressing the entire population of the village into a single mold. The psychological state of the central operator is entirely destroyed. My assumption is that the central figure was the head of the village or a high-ranking member of the School of Mensis. The thousands of minds fused into the lower mass are completely incompatible, constantly fighting for control. The frantic head-grabbing animations simulate a mind that is experiencing extreme overload. The bizarre array of sounds, the grunts, the sneezing, and the burps are the result of hundreds of crushed respiratory systems trying to process air simultaneously at once. The creature possesses specific countermeasures for players who do not engage it on the ground floor. If you attempt to hide in the upper walkways after killing the Chime Maidens, the entity will elevate its entire mass. It uses its largest limbs to execute the sweeping corpses maneuver, violently scraping the entire length of the balcony to crush anyone hiding behind the pillars. If you approach too aggressively on the ground, the operator on the top will howl loudly while a deep red glow envelops the base. This channels a massive area of effect explosion, forcing the player to constantly manage their distance and stamina. The entity also utilizes its own body as ammunition. During the Rain of Flesh attack, the red portals actively drop severed limbs, rotting torsos, and loose organs directly onto the player's head. The entity weaponizes the surplus of corpses and portions from the failed ritual to crush its enemies. The complete lore of the One Reborn requires a close examination of the events preceding the Bloodmoon. The school of Mensis operated in absolute secrecy. Their towering agents, the Snatchers, scoured the lower streets of Yharnam to kidnap ordinary citizens. The scholars required an immense volume of raw material to execute a city-wide ritual. The primary objective of the Mensis scholars involved establishing contact with the cosmos to locate an infant Great One. To bridge the gap between the physical world and the higher planes of existence, they needed a substantial anchor. They constructed the One Reborn to serve as that physical vessel. A single human frame lacks the capacity to endure the immense pressure of a cosmic entity. The scholars hypothesized that fusing thousands of minds and bodies together would create a structure dense enough to house a descending god. They compressed the entire kidnapped population of Yahar'gul into a single agonizing mold. The Chime Maidens on the balconies execute the final phase of the summoning. These women are Fumarians, ancient beings originating from the underground labyrinths. The School of Mensis employed them to combine ancient blood magic with modern scholarly research. By ringing their bells, the maidens pull the amassed pile of corpses out of the dimensional void, forcing the construct to manifest physically in the plaza. When you defeat the One Reborn in Yahar'gul, the boss drops an item called a yellow backbone, a specific material that reveals exactly how the School of Mensis built the giant creature. Because these backbones belong to the dead Fumarians found within the ancient Chalice dungeons, it proves that the scholars went deep underground to excavate these ancient graves and brought the bones back to the surface to serve as the skeleton for their new god, relying on the lingering cosmic power held within the marrow. However, since the bones alone cannot move, and the scholars desperately needed blood and muscle to finish the ritual, they turned to the citizens of Yahar'gul to solve their problem. After kidnapping and slaughtering people directly from the streets, the scholars gathered the ancient bones of the dead and wrapped them tightly in the fresh meat of the kidnapped citizens, finally using a dark arcane ritual to bring the massive pile of bodies to life. The resulting failure stands as the ultimate testament to the arrogance of the Healing Church and its scholars. They believed they could force an ascension through sheer volume and genocide. Instead, they destroyed their own city to birth a screaming pile of fused corpses that could barely drag itself across the courtyard. The timing of this arrival connects directly to the death of Rom. While the spider remained alive in the lake, her illusion concealed the true progress of the ritual. The Mensis scholars operated behind this veil, steadily building their flesh construct in the shadows. When the hunter executes Rom, the veil permanently drops. The blood moon takes over the sky, causing the ritual to violently accelerate. The massive portal opens, and the accumulated weight of Yahar'gul's population drops onto the cobblestones. The environmental evidence left behind by the Mensis scholars paints a grim picture of their ascension. Deep inside the unseen village, you discover dozens of mummified scholars sitting rigidly in chairs, wearing heavy iron cages on their heads. Their physical bodies are completely lifeless. They deliberately abandoned their physical forms to project their consciousness to create the nightmare realm. Exiting the confines of the unseen village eventually leads the hunter into a realm which is disconnected physically from the rest of Yharnam.
Oh, Amygdala! Oh, Amygdala! Have mercy on the poor bastard!
The Nightmare Frontier is a hostile landscape composed of jagged rocks, poisonous swamps, and grotesque abominations. Dominating this landscape is the Amygdala. Throughout the earlier portions of the game, lesser versions of this entity cling to the architecture of the cathedral ward, watching the hunter silently. At the end of the frontier, you face one of these revered Great Ones directly in combat. The physical design of the Amygdala leans heavily into a mix of insects, especially the spider. It possesses an oversized almond-shaped head covered in deep grooves. Countless small, unblinking eyes bulge from the bone structure, glowing intensely when the creature channels arcane energy. The torso is slender and emaciated, appearing entirely disproportionate to the massive skull it supports. While the face is covered in long root-like tendrils, examining its limbs reveals a weird anomaly. The creature is completely asymmetrical. It possesses 4 arms on its right side, but only 3 on its left. On the left side of its back rests a deep, fleshy groove. It appears an 8th arm has violently torn off long ago. This specific detail implies the severed amygdala arm used as a weapon by prospectors originating directly from this exact species. The sheer volume of these creatures scattered across the city leads to widespread speculation regarding their nature. Many theorize that they operate as a single connected source of intelligence. The evidence points to the contrary. They display a complete lack of cohesive action. Some mind their own business, while others attack on sight. They operate as individual members of a widely revered cosmic species, existing independently of one another. The naming of this entity provides the direct answer to its purpose and behavior. The amygdala is a specific almond-shaped cluster of nuclei located deep within the human brain. Its primary function involves processing emotional responses, specifically fear and the reaction to a perceived threat. In medieval philosophy, the amygdala was regarded as a medium for animal spirits, balancing rational thought with primal action. This naming perfectly explains the varying aggression levels of these great ones. The lesser entities clinging to the cathedral ward remain completely passive because they do not view a low-level hunter as a threat. The entities in Yharnam actively fire arcane lasers because the hunter is actively disrupting the Mensis summoning ritual. The boss in the frontier fights with absolute fury because the hunter has invaded its personal domain. The creature constantly calculates danger and responds accordingly. These entities line the rooftops of the city long before the bloodmoon descends. They remain invisible to the common citizen. The human mind simply lacks the required perception to register and view their existence. A hunter must consume a massive amount of insight to force their eyes to see the creatures, or wait until the death of Rom shatters the illusion hiding them from the waking world. To fully understand the invisibility of the amygdala, we must examine how the human brain operates in the world of Yharnam. The mind utilizes a mechanism to filter out information that it cannot comprehend. If an ordinary citizen looked up and processed the sight of a colossal multi-armed entity resting on their local church, their sanity would instantly collapse. The amygdala remains unseen due to a severe limitation of human perception. The mind simply does not render the image. To break this mental barrier, a hunter must consume a specific resource known as insight. Insight represents the accumulation of eldritch knowledge. Master Willem of Bergenworth famously described this concept as lining the inside of the brain with eyes. When a player collects 40 points of insight, the sheer volume of this cosmic knowledge forces the brain to process the unfiltered reality. The hunter artificially forces their own vision to expand, revealing the entities that they were not able to see before. Collecting insight pushes the hunter closer to the true reality of the world. The realization that these colossal entities shared the exact same physical space as the citizens for years induces absolute terror. However, the highest ranks of the Healing Church were never blind to them. If you examine the stone architecture inside the Grand Cathedral and the hidden corners of Yahar'gul, you will find massive statues perfectly depicting the Amygdala. The church leaders carved these monuments long before the events of the game. They knew these cosmic entities were clinging to their rooftops the entire time. Instead of warning the public, they quietly worshipped the Great Ones in secret, proving the entire religion of Yharnam was built on a deliberate, horrifying lie. The Amygdala used their massive hands to grab humans and physically transport them across dimensional planes. The Amygdala outside Odin Chapel operate as a filtration system, constantly scanning the city to find and drag corrupted hunters into the hunter's nightmare. If you step outside the cathedral ward holding the eye of a blood-drunk hunter, one of these multi-armed watchers reaches down from the stonework to crush your physical body, violently pulling your consciousness directly into the hunters. The presence of this Amygdala raises questions about the events inside the sanctuary. When the blood moon rises, the woman named Ariana becomes pregnant with a celestial child. The game leaves a lingering question regarding whether the formless Odin orchestrated this or if the Amygdala clinging to the roof bestowed the child. The game establishes a deliberate mystery regarding the true parentage of this child. The chapel is named after Odin, a great one who lacks a physical form and exists entirely as a voice. The environment strongly implies that the formless Odin impregnated Ariana, drawn to her corrupted bloodline. The physical presence of the Amygdala directly above her room complicates this narrative. The official artbook of the game applies the "blessed with child" quote directly to the Amygdala species, raising profound questions about their involvement. We must question the exact role of the multi-armed watcher. The Amygdala might have acted as a physical surrogate, bestowing the child upon Ariana because the formless Odin lacked the physical means to do so. Alternatively, the Amygdala may have served as a guard, clinging to the roof to protect the chapel specifically to ensure the child was successfully delivered. The entity never attacks the chapel. It never reaches inside the windows to crush the survivors. It remains perfectly still, silently overseeing the birth of a new Great One right beneath its talons. This specific Great One in the frontier commands a dedicated worshipper. Patches the Spider lures victims to the cathedral ward, offering them a tonsil stone to ensure the Amygdala transports them to the frontier as a sacrifice. The medical term for the Palatine tonsils is actually the Amygdala, creating a clever linguistic. Patches worships the entity to secure his own survival, offering up fellow travelers to appease the Great One. During the encounter, the audio design contrasts heavily with its towering presence. The creature emits high-pitched wobbling sounds that resemble aquatic frequencies. It attacks with wide sweeping strikes from its multiple arms and stomps the ground heavily. When its health depletes to the final stage, it performs something brutal. The Amygdala reaches behind its back, grips its two lower arms, and violently rips them out of their sockets. It wields its own severed limbs as clubs to increase its melee reach. Defeating the creature yields the ailing Lauren Chalice, further solidifying the connection between these cosmic watchers and the ancient buried lands that fell to the Scourge centuries ago. The physical appearance of this entity leans directly into the cosmic side. The combat mechanics of the encounter in the frontier require extreme patience and spatial awareness. The creature uses its 6 arms to exert complete control over the battlefield. It executes wide-sweeping strikes that cover massive distances. It frequently slams its palms heavily into the dirt, releasing localized arcane shockwaves. The head serves as the primary weak point, but it constantly hangs high out of reach. The player must wait for the entity to execute a heavy downward smash, which temporarily lowers the skull to the ground. Rushing forward during this brief window allows the hunter to inflict maximum damage. The entity also utilizes a highly lethal ranged attack. The glowing eyes on its head flash brightly before firing a concentrated blue laser directly into the dirt. The beam itself inflicts 0 damage upon contact. Instead, the laser traces a distinct line across the battlefield. A brief moment later, the entire traced path violently erupts in a series of powerful arcane explosions. The player must observe the line drawn in the dirt and immediately dodge horizontally to avoid the delayed blasts. If the hunter decides to remain close to the legs of the creature, it employs a separate defensive maneuver. It violently flails its head and vomits a massive pool of highly acidic fluid onto the ground. The liquid quickly spreads across the arena, forcing an immediate retreat. During this final phase, the aggression of the creature multiplies. It frequently launches its entire mass into the air, attempting to crush the player beneath its sheer weight upon landing. The safest strategy during these massive jumps involves standing completely still. The creature tracks the movement of the player, and rolling frantically often places the hunter directly under the descending talons. Remaining stationary frequently causes the creature to leap completely over the player, landing harmlessly facing the opposite direction. While these cosmic figures orchestrated the events from the higher planes, the true cost of their ambition was paid by the citizens of the streets below. To fully comprehend the scale of this devastation, we must examine the victims who mutated before the descent of the bloodmoon, which are the beasts. Click here as we go back and investigate the creatures that started the hunt. Thank you for watching, and fear the old blood.